There are two emotions that drive our behaviour. One is love, and its opposite is fear. In life, that is our choice, and where passion is so important is because it comes from your soul. It is the way that you overcome the fear. And when you look at how Australian society functions now, it is overwhelmingly about fear. It's overwhelmingly driving a paradigm of you are in a very dangerous position. You need security. I'm from the government. I'll give you security. It's one of the three big lies, isn't it? I promise I'll love you in the morning. The check is in the mail. And the third big lie was, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you.
G'day everybody, this is Adam Gibson. Welcome to our Parents with Questions podcast. Joined today by a gentleman who is a global thought leader in the fields of leadership, passion, health, hemp, industrial hemp, the law, comedy, free speech and freedom. And he is the founder of a number of major initiatives that have happened globally in the freedom space. Charles Kovess, very happy to have you here. Join us on the podcast at last.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Great to be here, and well done with what you've done with Parents with Questions. Excellent work.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a big undertaking, but it was important at the time, and we're now moving from the fight against the vaccine narrative, I guess, and into just how do we create our future in a way we want. And I know that that's something you and I have discussed at length, and particularly today, of the many things we could be discussing, because you've got a resume as long as your arm in this space. But I think particularly your work as a coach, as a speaker, and developing leaders in the space, in the C-suite, in other words, the CEOs and COOs and those in charge of businesses and companies, how good leadership can really have a profound impact on Australia and what that means. And I guess the opposite of that too. So can we start with that now? And I will probably mention that, you're the founder of one of the founders of Health Alliance Australia. You are on the World Council for Health. You're one of the executive board members of the Medical Doctors for COVID Ethics International. You're involved in the Australian industrial hemp industry as a president of the Australian Hemp Alliance. You're chairman of the Australian Institute of Comedy, board member of the Aligned Council of Australia, among other things. You've got a long history of playing a pivotal role with leaders. So I guess
yes, that's fair.
Point,
and I forgot to tell you that I'm also the treasurer of the Australian Vaccination Risks Network that was founded in 1994 by Merrill Dorey, avn.org.au.
Yeah, we know Merrill well. What a legend she is. Yeah, wow. Okay, well, with that, I guess you've been involved in this freedom and health freedom space for a long time now, and we've seen what you're capable of in the tumultuous times of the last 4 or 5 years. But as we're looking forward, let's start with that point now. From this point forward, how can CEOs change the country? Tell us the mechanism by which business leaders have an impact on our future.
Well, the executive coaching that I have been doing for a long time, 31 years. I was a lawyer at M for 20 years. I was a international tax lawyer, business lawyer, and I stopped doing that to become Australasia's passion provocateur. So fighting for people to pursue their passion and to be given the space to pursue their passion in their environments. That's why I'm wearing my signature red jacket, because red is the color of passion. And my first book is Passionate People Produce, and the second book is Passionate Performance, all about passion. So after 31 years, I would suggest I'm one of the world's experts, if not the expert, on passion. And the question is, why would I give away a spectacularly successful legal career? I was the head of commercial law of the 10th biggest law firm in Australia. Why would I give that away to become an educator, if you like, a teacher? And this answers your question that the job of leaders is to lead human beings to achieve outcomes, agreed outcomes. And I knew back in 1993, when I stopped being a lawyer, that the GDP of Australia, gross domestic product of Australia, is a function of human productivity, of my productivity, Adam, of your productivity. So what's the key? What is the key to my productivity? The answer is one word: energy. Energy. More energy I have, the more productive I am.
Makes sense.
So I knew also that passion, and my definition of it in the book, but all my life I've done what I'm passionate about, which included becoming a lawyer. My definition of passion is that it's a source of unlimited energy from your soul, your spirit, your heart that enables you to produce extraordinary results. Extraordinary. So passion is a source of energy from your soul that enables you to produce extraordinary, above ordinary. Now, if I could get more people to be passionate, their energy levels go up. And Adam, you would find that in your own life when you're passionate about stuff. You've got access to huge energy. If I could, as an educator, as a speaker, as a facilitator, as a coach, increase the number of Australians who are pursuing their passions, that would increase levels of energy, that would increase GDP and have an impact on Australia in a whole range of unpredictable, unexpected ways. So that was the driver. Okay, so energy drives productivity, drives Australia's GDP, which is one of the core measures of successful nations. Not the only one, I agree. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem with the leadership in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the quality of our leaders is appalling. And it's appalling because over the last 31 years, I have taken direct evidence from people in audiences when I've done big conferences, small conferences, team building programs. I keep asking people, what percentage of Australians do you assess are passionate about their work? And I would ask you, Adam, that question. I'm not going to ask you, but you think about it. In your day-to-day life, how many people strike you as being passionate about their work? That might be the people, the cops who are doing their work. It might be any company that you have an interaction with. It might be trying to get service from somebody. What percentage of people are passionate? And over 80% of responses, of thousands of responses, have said in Australia, I've spoken in 8 countries around the world, but I'm talking about Australia now, less than 20% of Australians strike people as being passionate about their work. And that is an indictment on leadership. And why is it an indictment? Because I have never, and I know lots of people, I've been in business for over 50 years. I have never met somebody who's not excited, not enthusiastic, not interested in a new job role they're starting. And then 3 to 6 months later, their passion, their enthusiasm, their keenness, their excitement has been knocked out of them. And I'm saying 80% of the time. And I'm saying that's a failure of leadership. And so the work that I now do with executive coaching, of C-suite executive coaching, is to understand ourselves. You see, it all comes back from self-awareness. It comes back to self-awareness that CEOs and C-suite executives who understand themselves, who are aware of themselves, become far better leaders, because leaders need to understand who they're leading, and you cannot understand a person that you're leading any deeper than you understand yourself. And in my experience, most C-suite executives have very low self-awareness. And so that's the focus of my coaching. Hey, well, where do I find this self-awareness? Stanford Graduate Business School, of the whole range, 100 senior executives, overwhelmingly said self-awareness is the number one capability of leadership. So where do I get this? What's the pill that I take to get self-awareness? And then, we might unpack that, but that's where the gold lies. Each leader who says, gosh, what am I about? Who am I actually? And what impact does that have on my leadership? And then secondly, passion. Don't be a leader if you're not passionate about the business. So that's the element. So self-awareness and passion. And what this does is liberate amazing capabilities of men and women.
How do you define self-awareness? It's a term we hear a lot, but what are the qualities of a self-aware leader?
Well, I'll give you 3 in particular. Me and why.
Makes sense.
Number 2, to be consciously aware of my greatest achievements and the values that drove me to achieve those achievements. Number 3, to be consciously aware of how my thinking works. Those three.
Okay.
What upsets me and why? Why did I achieve what I did? What were the values that drove me? And then secondly, how my thinking works. And the fourth element is, what do I believe? Now, I've coached many senior executives, and I assure you, Adam, that most people have no conscious awareness of what they believe. And it's our beliefs that then drive our thinking.
Mm.
There's a wonderful saying by Wayne Dyer, an excellent teacher on spirituality. My first book was published by Hay House, and Wayne Dyer also was a Hay House author. He said, most people say, I'll believe it when I see it.
Mm.
Wayne Dyer famously said, no, you'll see it when you believe it.
I remember that book. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that's true, which I believe it is, then if you don't, then being aware of your beliefs about everything, that is such a crucial element in how you experience life. It's extraordinary. You go, wow. So what? Because if I don't believe something exists, I will not see it. And it ties in scientifically to how your eyes work. Think about that, Adam. When you think you're seeing something, no, you're not. A light ray is hitting your retina. A message is being sent to your brain and to your brain, but to your mind, and your mind interprets it. So if you don't believe that something exists, you will not see it. The best case of that, of course, is love. The best case of that is wonderful things that are happening on the planet, when so many people today are walking around saying the world is stuffed, everything is crap, which is a lie. There are so many wonderful, loving, wonderful examples of love in action, of people doing wonderful things. But if you don't believe it exists, you won't see it. And so that's self-awareness. We'll take those four. What upsets me and why? Secondly, what were the values that drove me to achieve my greatest achievements? Thirdly, how my thinking works. And fourthly, what I believe and how those beliefs impact on my thinking.
So let's play that out. So there's a leader in a business or an organization or a corporation who has those qualities and has taken those things on. What is the flow-on effect to the rest of the corporation and to their own life? I mean, how does that manifest?
When I understand how I think, what upsets me, it leads to this crucial principle that most leaders think that they can treat all their employees the same. Now, that is absurd. That's like a football coach treating every single player in the same way. And one of the core principles that I have taught over the 31 years is not just, Adam, that you and I and everyone watching or listening to this podcast is unique. In fact, every one of us is a weirdo.
Very true.
So here you are, you're a leader. You could be the CEO of 20 people, 100 people, 10,000 people. But most managers, they don't have more than 9, 10 direct reports. People run teams. It can be the simpler the task, the bigger the teams. Here's the issue. Every person working in a company is a weirdo. And so what most C-suite executives do is they treat everybody the same, literally as robots, rather than as weirdos. And the job of the executive is to understand the weirdos that they're leading so that they can get the best out of these weirdos. But if you don't understand this in yourself, you will never understand it in other human beings. That's why your self-awareness is so important, because you have no conception. If you've never turned your mind to this, if you've done no personal development, if you've done no deep, introspective, powerful executive coaching, you have no idea about this stuff. And so therefore you live life at a very unconnected space. And then what happens is you never tap into the genius of the people you lead. Like you judge people. One of the things it's in the Bible. It says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." As soon as you, and I use the word weirdo in a loving way, as a provocative way, as a passion provocateur, it's not a judgment that weirdo is bad. I say weirdo is good. But as soon as you say about somebody, that person is an idiot, that's a judgment, that's a conclusion. Your ability to understand them has disappeared. And what I'm coming back to is understand me, I can understand you. If I judge you, then I've got no chance of tapping into your genius. And I'm a fan of Buckminster Fuller. This map behind me is a Dymaxion map of the world. It's the most accurate flat map of the world. It's 99. It's got a 1% variation on reality. And Buckminster Fuller said, every child is born a genius. And the evidence to me is overwhelming that that's the case. And then what happens is that life knocks the genius out of people. And what my work has been for 31 years is to remind people, almost like remember, become a member again of who each one of us is, what we're capable of, and then to inspire C-suite executives to go, wow, my job is to do something very difficult. My job is to get a group of human beings, a group of weirdos to work well together. And let me give you the answer. Well, how do you do that? Because that would be the obvious next question. There is a beautiful line in the Old Testament. There's a lot of wisdom in the Bible, Old and New Testament. Without a vision, the people perish. Without a vision, the people perish. And in your own business life, you go, when do people work well together? Well, wartime is a case in point of a vision. A powerful vision unites human beings. And there's another saying that says, when one thing unites us, it overcomes all the things that divide us. I'll give you an example. Collingwood supporters at the football. Right? You get the captains of industry, surgeons, doctors, lawyers, Eddie Maguire, or it could be the Rabbitohs in Sydney, in rugby. All these supporters come together. The whole demographics of Australia are covered in these thousands of supporters. They are all best buddies because they're united by the love of Collingwood or love of the Rabbitohs. And that's the case in point. And the job of the executives is to get his team of weirdos to work together and to trust each other and I'll just give you the other word in a moment, in fact, to care about each other as human beings. Because if the leader says, here's what we're wanting to do, then the supporters all come together and go, great, we love that. And then if the team is handled in such a way that they trust that they're all working towards achieving this vision, without a vision the people perish, then suddenly people are working beyond themselves. And that's a spiritual resource. And that's when you tap into passion, right? Because you are inspired by the game that the manager wants to play. And I'll give you an example. In one of Australia's biggest banks, I coached one of the leaders for some 10 years. And his team was the best performing team out of 60,000 people in this bank. And it was because of all of these things that I'm talking about, that when you tap into this amazing resource that every human being is capable of, and very few, less than 20% achieve it, magic happens.
Because it's tapping into the latent potential, isn't it, of the team? That's what I'm hearing. That energy and the creativity and the genius, as you said, of the team is what a good CEO or a good leader can harness, if you like, or help them express.
And Patanjali, a Hindu philosopher, he said, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, great, and wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents become alive, and you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. Always driven my work. That's been one of my favorite quotes. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents become alive. And, so many stories, Adam. I'm sure you've read many books. I have read many books of people who absolutely stunned themselves by what they were capable of in particular circumstances.
Yeah, there's another quote. I think I can't remember who's it by, but the essence of it is, once you put an intention there that's strong enough and the passion's there, the universe starts conspiring to assist with in all manner of ways you hadn't anticipated. And
Yes, that's the famous Goethe quote.
that's the one.
Johannes
Yeah.
Goethe
Yeah.
says,
Mm. So,
unanticipated forces and energies come together.
yeah. So it sounds like leadership in the framework you're offering, which makes sense. That's a skill set that we certainly don't learn that, as far as I know. We don't learn it at university. We don't learn it at school, that's for sure. Is this something that is culturally been knocked out of us, or is it something we need to consciously take on, or what's the lack of it due to?
Well, this question of leadership is an interesting one. Because there is positional leadership, and then there's situational leadership. And the choice, Adam, is I don't think it's not so much a shift that's consciously happened. It's been, I think, orchestrated. So it has been orchestrated, and many people that you mix with, because you see what happens is you don't mix with people who aren't aware. That's what happens. You don't spend a lot of time. In simple terms, over the last 40, 50 years, in fact, since I finished university in the early 70s, what's happened, I think, is there are two emotions that drive our behavior. One is love, and its opposite is fear. Over the last 50 years, the fear porn that is promulgated, which also includes the COVID porn, fear porn, and that's why, I discovered the health fear porn 14 years ago when I was helping lawyers strategize remedies to help parents whose children were damaged by vaccinations, and that was denied. And our society, 31 years ago, I saw this message that government wants us to be fearful, and in life, that is our choice. And where passion is so important is because it comes from your soul. It is the way that you overcome the fear. And when you look at how Australian society functions now, it is overwhelmingly about fear. It is overwhelmingly driving a paradigm of, you are in a very dangerous position. You need security. I'm from the government. I'll give you security. It's one of the three big lies, isn't it? I promise I'll love you in the morning. The check is in the mail. And the third big lie was, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. And we Australians have become from questioning government to relying on government. And that's been deliberate. And it's been deliberate in the Western world to trap people into choosing security over freedom. And I think that's a disaster. And that's why I'm a freedom warrior. I think giving away your freedom, letting government regulate you to the nth degree for the illusion of security. I'll give you security, Adam. I'll put you in jail. I'll take away your freedom, but I'll give you security. I'll give you 3 meals a day and you can stay there. You want that? Oh, no, I don't want that. But the fact is, I don't have the link here at the moment. Research shows in America, Canada, UK, Australia, a significant majority of people would choose security over freedom. I would never give away my freedom for this illusion of security, because that whole message is about hammering fear. Be scared, be scared, be scared. And I'm about, no, we weren't made to be fearful scaredy cats. We were made, as that quote that I shared with you, we were made to become amazing contributors to the planet, to advance humanity. That's our job, not to shrivel up in a little corner and to be scared. And what I call on C-suite executives is to understand this calling. And every executive that does that unleashes an extraordinary range of possibilities, like throwing a pebble in a pond. And one employee whose fears you liberate, and by the way, I'm going to give you the evidence of this. I have a fantastic, over the years, I always collected great insights. Well, the 14 rules of Deming. Remember W. Edwards Deming?
Don't know.
Totally rejuvenated the Japanese manufacturing system.
Oh, yes. Yep.
the American guy who went to Japan after World War II, he had 14 principles. And this is what these principles still apply to Australian leadership and global leadership. But his point number 8 was this 3 words: the job of the leader: drive out fear. 3 words.
Very interesting. Because we're in that state, Charles, the layer of there's the usual things to be fearful of, I guess, if you want to, but there's also, for leaders now, they're facing this sort of woke, mentality or culture of woke, which is another layer of, if I say the wrong thing, I'll be cancelled or pulled down for that. So, I mean, and you've talked recently in a podcast I was listening to yesterday around truth versus comfort in that time of wokeness and compliance and the fearful narrative. Can you speak to that? Is that the same thing? Speak the truth or be comfortable? Are the two things
absolutely? That is
the same as freedom and security?
Well, Adam, well picked up. That's precisely what it is. You see, if you don't speak the truth, then because of the fear of the consequences, then you are ripping off the organization. You are ripping off the team. You are acting for your own comfort. And I deliberately use the word comfort to provoke people because they go, oh, that's my security. I've got to pay my mortgage. And indeed, over the 450 meetings that I've moderated for the Medical Doctors for COVID Ethics International, that's the overwhelming message. Why did doctors inject people with an experimental bioweapon? And the answer that most doctors will give you is, number one, the authorities told me to. And number 2, and this is disgusting, I have a mortgage to pay.
I've heard that so much, over and over. It's it.
So the cancel culture is a deliberate strategy by what I call the globalist agenda, to make one world government, the World Economic Forum, the Klaus Schwab of this world. You see, the message is the world would be a better place if we had one world government controlling it. That's what the EU is about. That's what these links of countries are about, purporting that's what the United Nations is about. That's what the World Health Organization is about. And I say that's a disaster. I'm fighting for Australia. That's why I do this work that I do in terms of freedom. And I want to inspire business leaders to come out and push back against Australia giving away sovereignty for this illusion. You see, that's the message. You see, if people are scared, well, let's give sovereignty to the United Nations because the United Nations says it will look after us. I say bullshit. No, it won't. And the think about this, no one ever raises this question. If there is one world government, who's going to be the leaders who make the decisions for that one world government? Have you ever seen, Adam, anywhere where that conversation happens?
Never. No.
I haven't. Who are these mysterious people who are suddenly going to be doing it? And Patrick Wood, who's big on fighting technocracy. Technocracy first came into common usage in 1938, where the bureaucrats go, life is getting too complicated. There are too many technical issues. We technocrats should be making the decisions. That you and I, as human beings, politicians aren't clever enough to do that. And I'm fighting for Australia to retain its sovereignty. I'm fighting for every nation to retain its sovereignty. And this idea that a one world government would create utopia on the planet, I say again, is bullshit. So the cancel culture is designed to stop C-suite executives from speaking the truth. And the C-suite executives, in my experience, fall into the trap of following the system. Why? Because it's comfortable. When if you said to me, hey, what are the five most important capabilities of leaders, I put courage as number 1.
Absolutely.
And so courage, take this one step further, take one step back. So why would a C-suite executive be courageous? Why would a judge be courageous? And the answer is because they're inspired by the truth. They're inspired by what should be happening. And passion, here's the interesting word. Think of the etymology of the word courage. Think of, where does that word courage come from? It comes from the French word cœur, from the Latin cor, meaning heart. And so I said to you before, the two emotions that drive us are love and its opposite, fear. Where does fear come from? Fear comes only from your mind. Love comes from your heart. Where does courage come from? From your heart. Courage is when your spiritual resources overcome the fear, which is mental. All right? There's the question for me of leadership is, where on this spectrum of love and fear do leaders sit? And if they're on the fear spectrum, then what happens is they shrivel up into incompetence. They shrivel up into incompetence. And it's the opposite of the Patanjali quote that I said to you. When you're inspired by some great purpose, no, many business leaders, and that's why they kill the passion, because they don't want the genius whom they lead, the weirdos that they lead, to come and take their position. They want to suppress them. And one particular way that they do that is the information flow. They suppress the information flow down to their team because they're fearful about their own work. And there's another issue here around self-awareness. And I want to liberate your viewers from this problem. Most senior leaders I've dealt with are, in fact, consumed by fears. They really don't think of themselves as being particularly competent. And they, if the truth came out about their incompetence, they would, they'd be terrified. So they pretend to be masters of the universe. Now, let me give you a very practical thing that I found to be liberating. I hope it is for you, Adam, and everyone watching this. Imagine this: an Olympic-sized swimming pool, 50 meters long, 30 meters wide, contains 1 million litres of water. So I used to be an international water polo referee. I was chairman of Victorian Water Polo. I refereed at the 1984 Olympics. Just before the Olympics, when women's water polo, I was a member of the Australian women's water polo team, actually. And that's where I got my international qualifications, refereeing the World Championships for the women. So I had a lot to do with swimming. I was president of the Lawn Surf Lifesaving Club for 5 years. And if I went through my list of leaderships, I've had a lot of leadership experience. So please, this is not theoretical that I'm discussing with you. So if in this Olympic swimming pool, this 1 million litres of water, if we imagine that as being the sum total of human knowledge, the smartest person in the world that you can think of, and the person that comes to my mind, is Elon Musk. I mean, building buddy space rockets and space, just blows my mind. But, think of someone that you think is super smart. If you think of the smartest person you can, of this 1 million litres of water, how much of this water do you think, how much of this knowledge do you think the smartest person would know? 10,000 litres?
Yeah, it's
maybe 100,000 litres. Smartest person. And so what I'm saying is every single one of us only knows a tiny proportion of all there is to know. And one of the liberating ideas that kills fear is to stop pretending you know it all. You don't have to pretend, because we know as a fact that nobody knows it all. The liberation is when a leader says to his team, I don't know what the answer is. You tell me what the answer is. The job of the leader is to unleash that genius. You might be leading 15, 20 weirdos. Well, their job is to give you the answer, because between the 20 of you, you've got far more chance of solving a problem than the mythical manager who's got all the answers.
It's that self-awareness of knowing that there's stuff I don't know that I don't know it yet. Isn't it? It's almost like, that's self-awareness. So I don't know everything. And I don't even know what I don't know.
And admitting, you say, hey, listen, I know this little bit. The rest of it, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot like most of us. And I've coached executives who are scared of going into cocktail parties, for example. Okay, you're probably very good at it. I'm very good. I can go there. I can talk to them. But still, the butterflies. I deliberately go to functions by myself, so I have to meet people.
Yeah.
And people said, I say to them, well, what's the problem with going to a cocktail party? Well, I might say something stupid. I say to them, well, just accept that you are stupid. In most matters, each one of us is stupid.
Mm.
Secondly, the way that you get over your problem of proving you are stupid. Remember that classic line, Adam, where you go, it's better to have people think you're stupid than to open your mouth and prove you're stupid.
Prove it. Yeah.
So when you go to a cocktail party, the best thing is practice, and becomes a self-awareness exercise, practice, craft a series of 20 questions that when you go to a cocktail party, you are asking the questions. So, and people love when you ask them questions about themselves. They're happily talking away, and you just sit there and listen and be attentive, deliberately pay attention. And I tell people, when you go to a cocktail party, be intensely interested in the person you are with, and bang, it becomes a joy.
Yeah.
So we're all idiots. We're all stupid. We all know a tiny little bit about the million litres of knowledge there is to know. And therefore, that dissipates your fear of being found out.
Come back to this concept of the courageous C-suite executive who does want to live from courage and live from passion, live in their heart, as you said. I know there'll be those listening to this now who go, well, I want to be that, but I've got shareholders who want me to make smart, boring, sensible decisions. I've got an executive team, and there's a lot of pressure to be, let's say, conformist, and for a lot of executives to be able to, use the COVID and the mandates and lockdowns and that aspect and how that affected businesses. Very few businesses really pushed back on that. They were reasonably quiet considering the impact it was having. That's not a blanket statement, but generally there wasn't an outrage. They weren't marching in the streets the way you might expect. What are how do we handle those risks of speaking up and being, putting the company at risk and those sort of things? That's kind of what would be holding a lot of people back.
Excellent question. Excellent question. And I've thought deeply about this over the last 5 years since it all started. By the way, for anyone watching this who wants to get hold of physical evidence of newspapers from February 2020, I've collected, particularly over the first 4 years of COVID, I've collected every Australian newspaper and most Herald Sun newspapers, physical newspapers, because you can no longer rely on the Wayback Machine to find out what was published. So if any lawyers need evidence in cases, contact me, because I've got the whole 4 years of physical newspapers proving what was claimed in these newspapers of record. Now, the answer to your question. So there you've got a manager who says, gosh, this is a bit crazy, having everyone at home on this. Now, what do I do about this? Well, I'll give you another example of this question of truth versus comfort. Imagine you are in Paris and you're in the French Resistance and you're committed to truth, okay? World War II. And the Nazis come knocking on your door. And you open the door and they say, are you a member of the French Resistance? And you're committed to speaking the truth. No. Yeah. In those circumstances, of course you would lie. Otherwise, you're dead.
Yeah.
Similarly, in big companies. And so you start to go, need to understand if you're at a big company, I've worked in big companies here, you have to understand how to start sharing messages that leads the company down a new path. For example, what I'm talking about, passion. So let's go to this proposition. Let's accept it for the moment that passionate people have more energy, but they're less controllable. And you then start to go, how am I going to get my fellow managers on board to say our job is to unleash the passion of the people that we're working with? Well, you start to get the data. You start to get the information in your company. You go to HR department. I'm coming back to the question of COVID. But I just want to give you this example because that was so unusual. What you have to do is to start to get information that you can feed to your colleagues and to your, if you're not the CEO, to your bosses. But if you are the CEO, to your chairman and to your board members. And you start to accumulate this evidence that goes, I don't think we should have lockdowns. Or I think we're losing too many people in this company who were good operators, they're being too easily headhunted. And one of the great companies in Australia was Roche Brothers, Roche. One of the founders was a guy called Jim Roche, whose two sons, Ken Roche and Dennis Roche. Ken competed for Australia in the 62 Olympics. They were clients of ours when we were lawyers, when I was a lawyer. I said to him, what was his test for good leadership? He said one of his core tests was, and he founded the company, by the way. I was having dinner with him at his 80th birthday in about 1988. Mm-hmm. He founded the company in 1927 with his brothers. His test for the quality of his awareness of what his people needed was how many of them asked for a pay rise. That was his test. And he said, in my whole 60-year career, 55-year career up until 80, I had 3 people come to me for a pay rise. They were the 3 failures that I had in that entire 55 years. And so this was a man who built a magnificent company with his brothers and had these philosophies. And one of the other philosophies that influenced me a lot in the work that I now do, I talked about mistakes. Mm-hmm. And most people are terrified. This is where the fear comes in. So you can't have innovation without making mistakes.
Exactly, yeah.
And I said to Jim, so what's your philosophy on mistakes? He says, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. And so our need in companies, if something's happening that you see, this is what leadership is about, that you see shouldn't be happening, your job then is to strategically influence. And in every company at the C-suite level, it's a different way to do it. That's where the insights come. Gosh, my 9 colleagues, C-suite executives, are thinking like this. Or if I'm the CEO, my direct reports are consumed by fear because of the way the board relates. So then the job would be to start educating the board. And so I've got a 5-step process, Adam. I've got time to tell you this, but it's quite useful to people who, if they're inspired by what I'm saying, you say, well, I've got a manager who kills my passion. Then I've got 5 steps to handle this, all right? And I've shared this in workshops. I've done work for the big 6 banks in Australia. Number 1, you educate your manager. And this is the answer also on the COVID issue. You educate them. That means you share not your own opinion, you share different sources of opinion. You start to take a medium-term view. Educate. Yeah. Number 2, repetition, right? Don't expect that if I sent one article to you from Harvard Business Review that would convince you. So educate, repeat. Number 3, appeal to a higher authority. So take the example of a manager who's killing passion, who's dictatorial, who's direction, who's imposing rules that are killing passion. Yep. You appeal to a higher authority. And one of the greatest sources of higher authority is particularly for a public company, is the annual report, the chairman's letter, the CEO's letter, and then the website of the company. I say to people, have you read the annual report? No, the annual report is gold, because if your manager's giving you a hard time, all you have to do is you grab the annual report, go to your manager and say, hey, here's what the CEO says, and here's what the chairman of the board says. You're not doing this. Why not? And if you keep doing this, I'm going to have to go to the CEO, because the CEO says, if you're not happy, John McFarlane was famous for this, and that came about because of the work that I was doing when he was CEO of the ANZ Bank. Said, if you're not doing this, I've got to go to the CEO. I've got to go to the chairman. Number four is to make your manager look good, so that he or she gets promoted out of the way. And number 5 is ring up the headhunters. And what you ring up the headhunter and say, gosh, Adam Gibson is a great manager. You guys should be retaining him and get him moved out of the company into another place.
Good move, yeah.
Never thought of that. And you start to understand, the process, like the French resistance in World War II. You don't have to come out and make yourself a victim, make yourself easily shot down. You have to play a medium game and start to go, gosh, the weirdos that I'm dealing with are killing the passion. We are missing out on innovation. We are losing great people. I'm going to start doing something. I'm going to speak to my fellow managers, fellow employees, perhaps a board member, and have a conversation around the COVID lockdowns, what our response should be, or how we think this company should go, or the fact that hardly any employee that I've spoken to is aware of the vision for this company, and I'm aware that without a vision, the people perish.
It's very interesting as you say this, because I'm reflecting the great irony in everything you're saying here, in this situation is that whilst CEOs and businesses and people are running for cover, fear-driven, trying not to be noticed, there is a niche market out there that is craving the vision, craving leadership in this space, who want to deal with companies. In the US now, they call them the liberty spenders. There is this vast movement of people who want to deal with companies that stand up for something and have a vision and push back on things and have more than just this sort of toe the line, fear-driven narrative to them. So I guess would you agree the opportunity there is for leaders to actually stand up and turn companies around to become
hugely
relevant right now?
It's fear versus courage. You see, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of fear. And that lack of courage is hugely apparent to me. And what happens is, I think Australia is such a small market, much more. It is a small market of some 27 million people. And my observation is that corporate Australia is really run by about 1,000 human beings, some 20% of whom are women, 80% are men. I'm all about merit. And by the way, anybody who says that women are underpaid in this country is talking crap again, because not one enterprise agreement makes a distinction between men and women. So don't talk crap. So these 1,000 human beings who have, on average, these 1,000, the top 1,000, I know many of them, they are directors of anywhere between 2 and 5 listed companies. And this club, you think about, Adam, the motivators of the people in this club, and I call them out on it, their number one motivator is to be considered to be achieving results based on profits. And they don't want to do anything. They don't want to do anything that's going to throw them out of this 1,000 member directors club.
Yeah.
That's what's stifling Australia.
What do you see as possible, Charles, should those 1,000 people were living from their passion, were speaking their truth, courageous decisions being made? What would happen? What would be the mechanism? How would it affect the rest of the country?
The biggest thing that would happen is that the legal system would observe the principles of our Constitution. That's the biggest thing that would happen. That these leaders, these business leaders, would understand and speak up to the attacks on freedom. Because here's my proposition to you. This country exists for its people, nothing else. What makes us human is freedom. If you take away freedom, if you put people into a jail cell, as I've given that example earlier, we are no different to animals. You tell me how we're different to animals. So we have consciousness that gives us freedom of thought, and our freedom to act, to make decisions, that's what makes us human. And leaders who conspire with government, because big business, the 1,000 Club, they're getting vast amounts of money from taxpayers through government paid to big business. They do not speak up against the attacks on freedom. They do not speak up against attacks on Australia's sovereignty because they want to be in the club. My vision for Australia and my vision for every country is that every country creates their future, and the behaviour of the top business leaders is crucially important. Because let me ask you a question. Do you think politicians direct big business, or do you think big business directs politicians?
Well, they're definitely being directed by big business, by lobby groups, without a doubt.
That is absolutely my view, that our politicians are boards. It's one of the classics. I know plenty of politicians. Some of them are good people, but the people who get up to the top, they are the ones who play the system. And my favourite definition of an honest politician is one who once bought, stays bought. And the influences on our politicians, particularly by Big Pharma, by the industrial, military, pharmaceutical complex globally, is profound. And I can understand it. If you're standing for election, someone says, Adam, I want you to stand for election, and I've got $1 million for your campaign. So you go, well, I need the $1 million. How would you push back against that person? And if you don't do what that person wants you to do, the next time they say, no money for you in the next campaign.
Do you feel men over the last, decade or two have been suppressed more than, have we been targeted almost as men to be,
Yes.
lesser leaders because of
Yes,
this woke narrative?
I think the best answer to that question is, broadly speaking, Jordan Peterson has articulated that well as an examiner of human behavior, of male behavior, and he beautifully puts that, the male men and women are different. We don't have to have the debate about it. That in my experience, and I know many, many people, men and women are different, and I think that's wonderful. And each one of us is a weirdo. And suppressing our journey for trumped up reasons, for made up reasons that says you shouldn't be a man, you shouldn't talk in this way, and indeed you shouldn't raise your voice, is such a deliberate attack on the system to make men fearful about being who they want to be. And again, drive out fear. W. Edwards Deming, rule number 8. By the way, it's worth just quickly. Let me just quickly run through this. Here's the 14 points that transformed Japan manufacturing and this whole industry after World War II. And here is, I'll do the short version. Number 1, constancy of purpose. Number 2, adopt the new philosophy. Who would have thought? Number 3, cease dependence on inspection. Build quality in the first place. 4, don't award business on the basis of price. Aim to minimize total cost, not just initial cost. 5, improve constantly and forever every activity in the company. I'll give you an example of that on this issue of responsibility, of personal responsibility. And I call out every leader who's watching this, you are responsible for the future of Australia. I am responsible for the future of Australia. Adam, you are responsible for the future of Australia. And what great leaders do is to get every employee taking responsibility for the future of the company. And I put this to you. Every single employee working for any leader is constantly thinking of better ways, faster ways, cheaper ways of achieving an outcome all the time. Our brains work that way. We have imagination, which is what the difference is between us and artificial intelligence. We have imagination. And my test for great leadership is that a good leader will be swamped by suggestions from his people. Hey, there's a better way to do this, a better way. And a leader who doesn't get those suggestions, that's my evidence for them that they're not good leaders. So improve constantly. Number 6, training and education on the job. Number 7, supervision to help people do a better job. Number 8, drive out fear. Number 9, break down barriers between departments. This is gold. It still applies. And in most companies that I've dealt with over the last 31 years, they haven't learned these lessons.
It certainly worked for the Japanese after the Second World War. Yeah. Okay.
Spectacularly.
Yeah.
So I am an optimist, and clearly I'm a failure because after 31 years of talking passion and leadership, it hasn't yet succeeded because less than 20% of Australians are passionate. But I want to work with leaders who understand what we're talking about here, Adam, of understand the value of unleashing genius rather than a control basis based on the fear of boards who are driving this. You can't have any upset happening. That's what excites me, and I'm up for the challenge. And I think we're going to get to a tipping point. And your podcast is one of the ways that we get to a tipping point of getting leaders willing to learn how important this stuff is.
Absolutely. And look, I would argue whether you've been a failure or not. And I know you're joking in saying that, but we also got to recognise that there's leadership has come from unusual places in the last 5 years. I've seen a lot of people that you'd expect to be leading the charge have been proven as cowards, and there's been people who have come out of nowhere and been real heroes. I'm talking mums who start homeschool groups, and people end up organising rallies, and just things that have. There's some leaders out there that have emerged from unusual quarters. But I do agree with what you're saying, instilling that as making that an ethos of the C-suite sort of leadership, that boardroom culture in our country would make a big difference.
There's one other big thing that I teach, Adam, and again, it's based on the work of Buckminster Fuller, a man who was awarded 47 honorary doctorates. 47. How many have you got?
Not many, none.
I haven't either. And Fuller, and I've taught this to many executives, and this becomes the liberation from fear. Drive out fear. The more love you have, the less fear you have. The more you come from here, the less that your mind dominates your decision making. Now, here's the question. As a human being, what is our reward for solving our problems? And all the C-suite executives we're talking about, all the leaders we're talking about, they've got problems. And people have got problems. And everyone I know has problems. The only person who doesn't have problems is if you put him into a jail, give him nice security. He doesn't have any problems. He's just bored like crazy.
Yeah.
Everyone's got problems. What's our reward for solving problems? And people say, I'll be happy. I'll be progressing. I'll be solving problems. I'll feel good. I'll learn from Buckminster Fuller this important principle. As a human being, your major reward for solving problems is not peace or happiness or joy or satisfaction. Your major reward for solving problems is bigger problems.
Interesting.
And in my experience, and as I said, I've been in business for more than 50 years. I've done so much coaching. I've dealt with teams over the years. Most people are unhappy because they've got problems. My promise to you is if you are willing to grow, your reward for solving problems is bigger problems. And when you embrace that idea, then you don't wake up in the morning dreading your problems. You wake up in the morning saying, wow, what an interesting day. Look at these big problems. And when people come to me with big problems, my response to them generally is to say, Adam, you must be pretty capable if you've created these problems in your life. So love your problems. You deserve them. And when you solve them, you're going to get bigger problems. That's the way the universe works, says Buckminster Fuller.
Very, very profound, Charles. I think there's a version of that I embraced years ago myself, which was that most of us don't, having problems isn't the issue. It's our problems aren't big enough to be worthy of our real attention. And I completely resonate with that.
Yeah.
How do people work with you, and what's the steps to get involved, or how do they get in contact with you and find out more about this philosophy and this process of self-awareness at that board level, C-suite level?
Well, my website is charleskovess.com. Simple as that, charleskovess.com. All the connections are there. The core principles that we've talked about here are listed on that website. There's links to my Rumble channel, so you can find out deeply my philosophy on this. I do one-on-one coaching, and I do them in blocks of 6, and I find that from 6 sessions, this is not endless coaching, a block of 6 sessions can really, we're talking about competent people, in many cases highly competent people, and it's identifying the 1, 2, 3% shift in behavior. And over the course of 6 to 12 weeks only, we can make massive progress. And over that period of time, getting one insight that goes, oh, that's what's been really blocking me. Here's the belief that really blocks me, or here's the upset back of the trauma in the past that stops me being like this with my employees. And unlocking it, it's literally like in a top 100 golfer going from in the top 100 to the top 10. And today's a special day as we're recording this, with Min Woo Lee winning on the PGA Tour this morning.
Okay.
And that was his first PGA Tour win. The difference between number 1 and number 100 in the world is so tiny. Similarly, with the C-suite executives are very competent in certain fields. We need to find out what's the next stage of their improvement, what's the next stage in their journey, And that's what I'm good at, helping them to identify.
Fabulous. I'm going to ask you to wrap this up for us on, as you have mentioned already in this podcast, you're eternally optimistic, and you're in your 70s now, I believe, or early 70s.
I am.
Still young and fit. You've surprised me when you told me that, because you look a lot younger and you have the passion of a much younger man. But from your vantage point and knowing what you know and what you've seen over the last few years in Australia, what's your hope or your vision for Australia over the next few years?
My vision, and without a vision, the people perish. My vision is a land of freedom, full of passionate people, a land of freedom full of passionate people. And if we were to embrace that, then we can have as many migrants come in here, because everything flows from that concept. And when you come from passion, you're coming not from fear, but from love. And what that enables you to do is to not be a dictator. That is not imposing a life on a particular way. This is how do Australians, because I remember John Howard so clearly. He couldn't, a real struggle saying, what are the values that drive Australians? And I've read Australian history. I've read of the founding fathers, of the amazing 10-year process from 1891 to 1901 in the development of our constitution, where the 6 colonies came together to form Australia. It was such a powerful commitment to freedom, to individual sovereignty of the nation and individual sovereignty of Australians, so that they can go on living life in their own weird ways. And that's my wish for every one of you who are watching this, to truly be the weirdo that you were born to be. That's how the universe created us. That's how God created us. And that's the way that each one of us can make our contribution to Australia and to the planet.
Beautiful. Charles Kovess, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Adam. Great to be here.